Welcome to the Beeline's Superhighways online conference, and a big thank you to Skylark Productions for that video. Don't worry, Steve Backshall is chairing. I'm just like the airline steward before takeoff, covering off how things will work. We'll be joined today by a fantastic lineup of speakers, representatives from Cumbria Wildlife Trust, Network Rail, Avon Wildlife Trust, Professor Jeff Ollerton from Northampton University, and fellow speakers from BugLife sharing experiences from Beeline's projects across the UK. The 5 instars for our conference will be a first session of 45 minutes of presentations, a 15-minute break with networking opportunities, a further 30 minutes of presentations, followed by around 20 minutes of questions and answers. At 12 noon, we'll be joining in the national 1-minute silence as part of the UK's National Day of Reflection on the anniversary of the first UK lockdown. After this, the conference will formally close. There will be a further 30 minutes of post-event networking available in the lounge. If you'd like to share news about today's event on social media, please use #Beelines. During the sessions, please submit questions in the question and answer box, and then you can upvote any that you see there and like to make sure that they are asked in the Q&A session towards the end. Use the chat box to pass on comments either to all attending or to selected attendees. We will be recording the conference and sending out a link so you can rewatch it or share it with colleagues, but don't worry, only the formal sessions are being recorded. I hope you enjoy the virtual conference format. Do explore features of the Digi Lounge, move around from virtual table to virtual table and have a look who else is here. Searching for someone in the chat function should help locate them. And remember to use the elevator to change floors. Today's event is possible thanks to the generous support of the Esme Fairbairn Foundation, but also a big shout out to all the funders and donors who support our work standing up for bugs. We are very keen to work in partnership with you and your organisations, so please get in touch with us here at the conference and afterwards to have a chat about how to get involved. I will now buzz off and hand you over to our generous host, adventurer, author, conservationist, wildlife presenter and BugLife Vice President, Dr. Steve Backshall, MBE.
Wow, what a remarkably grand introduction. I now feel thoroughly silly for sitting here in front of a whole bunch of scrawlings by my kids when I am apparently so grand a person. I'm totally not. Thank you so much for that introduction there. The minute's silence was mentioned. You know, today is a somber day, an anniversary of lockdown and the way that all of our lives have changed. But I think that also for us, particularly involved in this conference, this chat today, it can be a sign of a good deal of positivity and change as well. Some of you will know that through the first lockdown, I was running regular wildlife Q&A sessions, and it enabled me to connect with as many as 400,000 households across the UK each time round. And because of that, I got a real sense of a growing excitement about nature, a discovery perhaps of things that for so many people, they just had not been aware of before. I think because in that first lockdown, our time outside was meted out to us in set chunks. It became incredibly precious, and people really focused on it and focused on what they were going to do with it and made sure that their time was productive and analyzed it a lot more as well. So I was getting huge amounts of responses from people saying, I've just heard this bird song in my garden. I have no idea what it is. What do you think it could be? Or I've just seen this amazing thing that looked like a bee, but had a great big thing sticking out the front of it. And I have no idea what it might be. And this curiosity, this reawakening of a sense of how important nature is something real. And it's something that we need to treasure and we need to hang on to. Which is why, you know, I'm so glad that this initiative is moving forwards. I think it's hugely important. So I have been a vice president with BugLife for, I think, about 13 years now. So 2 more and I get a fondue set and a set of towels. I'm very proud of much of what we've achieved. in that time. But I think this is our finest hour, potentially. I think the idea of beelines is simple, it's elegant, but it's a potentially dramatic solution to our most pressing problem from an ecological perspective. I'm not sure when I became the old git that was called upon as the voice of experience to speak at times like this. But as I have been alive now for nearly 50 years, it is quite a neat metric, my lifespan for change, and for change in a, for me, pretty significant, but in terms of our planet, an impossibly small period of time, 50 years. In that time, our planet's population has doubled. So since my parents were kids, it's tripled. But since I was a kid, our planet's population has doubled, and the wildlife on the planet has been cut in half. As you just saw in that video there, 97% of our wildflower habitats have gone since my parents were kids in the 1940s. When I was a kid, I can remember driving down country lanes with my parents in our old Austin 7, which had a hand crank at the front and a hole in the floor that you could see the road through as we were driving. That really does age me. But I can remember driving in the summer down country lanes in the New Forest on a warm evening, and that snow of moths and midges and other bugs that would form on the windscreen and be smeared away by your windscreen wipers and all over the front of the car. That bug snow. Remember that? I'm sure that the Top Gear imbeciles would be saying, "Good riddance, I'm glad it's gone." But for me, that was a fond, magical memory of a time that is long since past. And halcyon memories of my childhood, of a hot day wandering in a wildflower meadow that was just singing with crickets and buzzing with butterflies of a dozen species, the air alive with the buzzing wings of hoverflies and bees. I'm guessing that everyone that's involved here is an entomology enthusiast, and I'm sure that you have all had experiences like this. But they're few and far between nowadays, and perhaps you have had an experience like that, but not here in our sceptred isle, maybe overseas, somewhere exotic. Back when I were a lad, we had red squirrels. Kestrels hovered above the roadsides every few hundred meters as you were driving along. Hedgehogs, water voles, and certain songbirds were too common to even bother commenting on. The woodland behind my childhood home is now a housing estate. Our river is tainted with microfibers and bobbing bottles, and Britain has been declared one of the most nature-depleted nations on Earth. Our most noted naturalists declare that we have a generation to act or it's all over. We all live in our own little bubbles, don't we? So my own personal echo chamber is one filled with people who are like me, people who are really into nature and the outdoors, people who think that inherently every item of wildlife is important, and particularly the little things that rule the world. But it's easy for people outside that bubble to forget us, because we can be quite a quiet bunch, hunched in tents in knitted sweaters over our binoculars and our pot noodles. But the climbers, campers, ramblers, anglers, kayakers, wildlife and conservation charity members, farmers, natural history nerds, gardeners, twitchers, naturalists, and naturists, there's an important difference, science geeks and outdoor enthusiasts of this nation number tens of millions. And people outside of these groups are starting to realize that we are culpable and responsible when it comes to biodiversity loss, pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change. So I guess that we've been involved now for a long time in trying to set things right, from the very, very top down. And I think that things are beginning to move. I get a sense that, some of our most powerful politicians are starting to realize quite how powerful we can be. And even if it's just pure and simple because they kind of figure they can get some good PR and brownie points by ticking the green box, I don't care. I don't care what their motivation is, as long as they do it. as long as they get on side, as long as we can get a powerful, potent environment bill, and we can start setting things right in this wonderful nation of ours. Because, you know, there are so many problems that we have to set right, and healthy ecosystems make simple sense. So, so far, so gloomy, but there are positives, and I think beelines is one of those. I'm not going to try and talk about it in any depth because there are so many people who are going to be coming on to this conference who are better qualified than me to talk about it. They're probably, sat at home in their pants, just like I am. Or am I? Who knows? For too long, we've had an antiquated view of nature as being a free-for-all, as being out there to be endlessly exploited. So John Muir wrote of a grand harvest being reaped while nobody sowed. That's no longer acceptable. We need to transform the environment from an afterthought issue to the glue that binds everything else together. There's a lot of talk of reducing nature to numbers on a balance sheet, and I've fallen into that trap myself, but it's so much more than that. Our natural landscapes define so much of our national psyche, and that's something that I've really seen over this last year, is people defining themselves from the wonders of nature. The quality of nature that we have is really important to our well-being, physical and mental. So, it's not just about what we can give nature, but what nature can give us. I've been lucky enough to work with some of the young people engaged in the new wave of activism I'm sure many of you are sensing to protect our planet, to make it a better place. And they have that fire in their eyes, that passion that they can make a difference and they can change the world for the better. And I, for one, completely believe them. Nature and the outdoors is a free panacea for multitudes with mental and physical health issues, a solace for the soul. Take care of nature and it will return the favor. I have extra added impetus right now at this time in my life to try and drive forward all of our various plans because, as you can see from the wall behind me, I am a dad to 3 very young kids. Logan, the oldest, is 2.5. And one of the most exciting ways that he is developing and learning is through engaging with nature. And one of the best ways that I have of developing my relationship with him is going out and pond dipping, going out and, bug bothering, making bug hotels. All of these things have been absolutely critical to us. And it has been one of my greatest joys as a dad, and something that I very much look forward to doing more in the future. So let me introduce our first speaker. Professor Jeff Ollerton is a consultant scientist and author with a particular focus on pollinators. He's currently visiting professor of biodiversity at the University of Northampton and has been studying pollinators and their interactions with flowers for over 30 years. He is the author of more than 125 research articles and book chapters, as well as more popular articles for magazines such as British Wildlife and New Scientist. His book, Pollinators and Pollinations, Nature and Society, was published in January by Pelagic Publishing. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Professor Jeff Ollerton.
Steve, Jeff doesn't seem to be able to come to stage at the moment, so I suggest we move on to our second speaker and we sort out Jeff separately.
Okay, sorry you all. I've just heard that we've got some technical issues with Jeff, so we will move back onto him a little bit later on. First of all, hopefully I've got Jamie out there. I'm going to look and see if I've got a little thumbs up to make sure that Jamie is available. Jamie is Bug Life's projects manager, and he is leading on the beelines work. So he's a really good person to get a sense of the real broad overview of this magnificent project. He also helped to map the beelines network for much of England and Scotland. So fingers crossed, you all. I promise it's not me that's doing this tech. If it was, nobody would be hearing anything at all because I'm useless at it. But let's turn over to Jamie Robbins from Bug Life as our next speaker.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve. Bear with me while I try to share my window, which it now doesn't want to do. Here we go. So yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm assuming you can all hear me. I've not got a message coming up saying anything differently. So yeah, my name is Jamie Robbins. I'm project manager at Bug Life. And as Steve said, I've been helping with mapping the beelines network for a number of years now, including a large part of England and Scotland. And I've been working on the report that we're celebrating today. So many of you will have heard either from Bug Life or our partners about beelines for a number of years now. A beelines map covering the whole of the UK has been an ambition of Bug Life for nearly a decade. So it's been long in the making. But how did we get here? Well, in 2011, our first beelines mapping effort was piloted in North Yorkshire, which involved working closely with academic partners to make sure that the beelines work that we're celebrating today is underpinned by research and supported by the science. This is just the first piece in the beelines jigsaw, which has seen county and regions added one by one over a number of years and has culminated in the really amazing few years for Bug Life. In 2018, Wales became the first country with a completed beelines map, thanks to the help of the Welsh Government. So we finally had a completed network for a whole country, meaning a national approach could be taken. And amazingly, just 2 months later, we were able to add the Northern Ireland network, thanks to support from the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And in the last 12 months, we've seen the completion of the England map, thanks to funding from DEFRA, and now Scotland, through our ongoing Growing Beelines project work funded by the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. So the completion of the map, which you can all see there, is hugely symbolic for pollinator conservation and a really important step forward for our efforts. But it's very much just the beginning, which is why we're here today. It's an exciting day. We're launching the beelines map. We're also launching the beelines report, which you can see on the left-hand side there, and the wonderful animation that kicked off today. If you joined us late, I would encourage you to look at the animation on social media and share it, or look at this recording when it's put online. It's a really great way of selling and celebrating what beelines is. But our task now is to use this report and animation to inspire and enthuse everyone from communities to decision makers to act for pollinators. The event today has brought together current beelines partners, landowners, conservation organisations, national infrastructure companies, statutory bodies, funders, and everyone in between. And I hope that today is a real turning point in our combined efforts to combat the pollinator declines that make beelines so urgent and so relevant. I was going to talk about what Jeff had outlined so clearly, but obviously he'll be speaking after me now. So Jeff will be highlighting the importance of pollinators and the extent to which the crisis they're experiencing is affecting them as a result of landscape and climate changes. So I'll leave that to Jeff to cover. But we know that the only way to address the challenges is to make ambitious commitments to putting wildflowers back into the countryside and to do so at scale. But it's essential that we put wildflowers back in the countryside and in our towns in the right places, that they help to restore connectivity, and that everything is in place to ensure that we encourage thriving populations of pollinators so they can move across our landscape. This involves, restoring and creating habitats with time, funding, and coordination. It's not as simple as scatting wildflower seeds in the countryside, stepping back and watching things grow. We need to make sure that all of this work is in the right place, that it's well thought out, and that it's useful in the long term, and so it represents value for money and the effort invested. And we think beelines are the answer. So what are beelines, and how did we map them? As you will have seen if you caught the animation at the beginning of today, beelines are a connected network that reach into every corner of the UK and cover every county. Without getting too technical, they're 3 kilometre wide corridors that connect our best remaining wildflower-rich habitat, the real remnants of those pollinator-rich habitats that we have left. So to help our pollinators, we need to focus on reconnecting these remaining areas, which now often find themselves small and fragmented. Our increasingly managed, farmed and urban landscape can be difficult for pollinators to cross. So if we all work together to ensure that 10% of this beeline network we've identified is filled with stepping stones of wildflower-rich habitat, we can restore that connectivity across the landscape that our pollinators need. And we know from academic studies that this approach to delivering, by delivering habitat in stepping stones in a linear fashion, is the best way to help pollinators to move across the landscape. Of course, everyone can do their bit for pollinators everywhere, but a diffuse delivery of pollinator habitat across the landscape doesn't have as much bang for its buck, and it doesn't deliver the connectivity that we need. And these beelines corridors can help to focus and guide that national effort to restore and create our pollinator habitats. Sorry for skipping the slide then. But this isn't something that bug life can do alone. It really is a shared endeavor. And that's why from the very first day of beelines, we worked with partners across the UK, with conservation partners, local authorities, statutory agents, everything in between. It has to involve people that know their local landscapes. So to map beelines, we sourced as much information as possible. We wanted it to be based on the best picture of habitats on the ground and how they are useful for pollinators. So we didn't just focus on wildflower meadows, we also focused on chalk grasslands, heathlands, sand dunes, and scrub, the really best flower-rich habitats for our invertebrates. But crucially, we didn't just, as the last screen showed, some computer modeling outputs, we didn't just use them. We understand the importance of that local knowledge and local expertise. So we actually mapped them around tables, in workshops, county by county, region by region, over nearly 10 years. Of course, recently some of these were completed using online whiteboards and adapting to the way we're all living now. But this was involving people that know the land in each county and know how to interpret these maps to make sure it's a truly local network. So what we have is a series of locally produced beelines maps that connect at the regional and country level. And that really does pick up local priorities and puts them in a national context to help save our pollinators. And this underpins everything that beelines are about. They're not just something for bug life to shout about, but it's a joint effort to help reverse pollinator declines. And it's this shared approach that's key to taking it from being just a map to an on-the-ground network of wildflower-rich habitats. And we want big blocks of connected flower-rich habitats. And this is where the real work comes in. It's also what will form the basis of many of the talks today following me. As beelines can't be delivered alone, it needs the support and buy-in of everyone to help save the much-loved pollinating insects. So as we'll see with the other talks today, beelines can be delivered in a whole different range of ways, and we're confident they can succeed everywhere. We want to see the agricultural landscape transformed, so it doesn't just deliver food, but crucial wildflower-rich grasslands. And we'll see how beelines can be used to prioritise the restoration of wildflower-rich habitats using locally sourced seed and green hay. But importantly, we'll also see how bringing wildflowers into our urban communities isn't just a benefit for wildlife, but for the communities that live there. It brings colour and life back into town and city spaces that have become greyer and greyer over the last several decades, and help increase people's connections with the natural world. As Steve was saying, we know how important the open spaces have been to communities during lockdown. It's been a difficult year, and we hope that we can use that to really push beelines and wildflowers and open spaces to the next level. It's about bringing wildlife back into cities. It's about righting a wrong. It's about bringing people and nature back together and improving the health and well-being for local residents. So today isn't just launching this map and the report, but it's also to start a conversation about how we can all do this together, how you as an individual or your organisation can help to fill in the spaces on our beelines map. So if you go onto the beelines website, you'll see this new completed map, and if you click in on each region, you'll see the dots of habitat that have been delivered in each region. And that's what I also want to celebrate today. Beelines have been running for a number of years, and I'm very pleased to say today that all of the work that our partners and BugLife have delivered so far has now managed to deliver 1,500 hectares of wildflower restoration or creation, which is a really, really important first step. And this is down to the efforts of wildlife trusts, local authorities, national trust, farmers, local volunteer groups, everyone. So please read the Beelines report that will be shared to you following this session. Read the report, share it with others to inspire action. Go see our interactive map and see whether you as a householder or volunteer group or conservation organisation can do something to help felines as well. And I hope the rest of the day will help inspire you all and you'll enjoy celebrating what we've all achieved so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Jamie. True pro there, managing to do a piece that he clearly prepared to come off the back of Jeff speaking when Jeff hadn't spoken, which I have to say is top skills from you there, Jamie. Really good work. I also absolutely love that beelines map. It looks exactly like when I tried to get Logan, my 2.5-year-old, to color in into a great big space, just big scrawls with a big red pen there. But every single one of those red lines is something very special. It's a critical part of, setting things back on track, getting back our thriving natural habitats. So thank you so much, and thank you for putting it into such clear, lucid terms. We all really appreciate that. So I think that I've still not got word that Jeff is back online, so I'm going to move on now to our next speaker. Thank you very much, Jamie. This is Claire Dinham, who joined Buglife in 2010 as a Brownfield Stepping Stones officer, working to conserve and raise awareness of these important sites at various places across England. In 2014, she returned to Wales to set up the Buglife Cymru office and develop the team. As Wales manager, her role is varied, covering project delivery, development and management to advocacy work and fundraising. Highlight in recent years has been working to conserve the rare blue ground beetle in South Wales with her colleague Liam, project partners and the local community. So, croeso, Claire Dinham, ti'n iawn?
Diolch, Steve. I will just share my screen. Bear with me.
All looking good. I'm going to sign off.
Great stuff. Thanks. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks again, Steve. My name is Claire Dinham. I'm the Wales manager for Buglife Cymru, and today I'll be giving you a quick run through of our beelines work in Wales to date. So we completed our beelines mapping in 2018 in Wales. This work was kindly funded by the Welsh Government and the Trunk Roads agents, and involved a lot of data collection, working with the local record centres, excuse me, and running a series of regional workshops to produce these finalised maps. So after completing the map, we were really excited to get down on the ground, start working with some partners and delivering some beelines. So we secured 12 months worth of funding in 2018 to deliver a project in Swansea and Neath, Talbot, working on a variety of what you might consider non-traditional sites when thinking about beelines. So for example, Cymru there is a coalspore site. Pluck Lake is a former copper smelting site in the lower Swansea Valley, and Kilvey Hill, which is a community woodland. And we also brought on some new partners for this project, new to us anyway, which were the local health board and a housing association called Titarian. So that was, if you like, the precursor to what might be the bigger budget sequel, which is the Neath Talbot Beelines project. So this is a 3-year project which we started in October of last year, funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, with supporting funds from the Delverton Trust. So our aim for this project is to work with partners and communities to restore a minimum of 40 hectares of habitat within the beelines within Neath Talbot, and encourage partners and communities and others to do their own restoration and creation works as well. This slide shows our current project sites in red and existing areas of valuable habitat in blue. And we've circled there one of our main key focus areas in yellow. So this is just showing the fact that we've got huge sites like Tartar Steel in Talbot and Kenfig National Nature Reserve. And we've got one of our partner sites there down on the left, Crumlin Burrows, Triple SI and the Uni. And there's that sort of gap in the middle there, which is a mixture of brownfield land, various other habitats, also built up urban areas. There's large residential areas within that. So we really want to increase the permeability within that area. So I'm just going to run through a few of our sites quickly. So this is Brynau Farm, the site in red there. The site to the left is Knoll Country Park, which is an existing site. So we're really bolstering the habitat there and trying to create some resilience within the landscape. So, oh gosh, I just noticed I put the wrong label there, sorry, where it says Crumlin Burrows SSSI, that should say Brynau Farm, my apologies there. So Brynau Farm is a large Woodland Trust owned site. What they're doing on the site is quite large-scale tree planting, but the site also supports a mosaic of habitats. You can see that there's various types of woodland, grassland, scrubby areas, some nice wet areas as well. So we're going to be sourcing some locally harvested seed this autumn to enhance some of the poorer areas on site, and work with the Woodland Trust in terms of influencing the management to ensure that the site is suitable and amenable for pollinators, as well as the other wildlife that will be considered within the site management. And there's going to be some help from the boys here. These are some rare breed Welsh whites. They're going to be grazing across the site as well to sort of carry on the traditional management to help increase the diversity within the grassland swards on sections of the site. So our next site is Crumlin Burrows SSSI, and this site consists of a large site, it's over 240 hectares. It's made up of dunes, salt marsh, and the large sort of beach and shore area there. Now that's owned by Natural Resources Wales, but managed by Swansea University. And Swansea University Bay Campus is just that small area to the left of Crumlin Burrows there. So we're working with both sites. This is just a shot of Crumlin Burrows, and that shows you the proximity to the Bay Campus of the uni there. At Crumlin Burrows, there's a bit of an issue with invasive non-native species. So earlier this year, we've been working with contractors in the uni to dig out the Rosa rugosa, the Japanese rose. And what we've been doing is actually burying it on site. So digging several meters down, burying the rose, and then capping it back off. In doing so, we're creating then gaps in the site, creating bare sand for the native flora to revegetate, and encouraging those early successional communities as well. So our next site is called Giant's Grave. Again, this site supports a nice mosaic of habitats and supports a wide variety of wildlife, from invertebrates to reptiles, small mammals. And this is a really important site in Neath, Talbot. Earlier this year, we undertook a site visit with the landowners, the local council. We produced a series of potential management enhancements that we'd like to undertake. And one of the main reasons for doing this from a pollinator's point of view is that this site is extremely important for a wide range of bees, and particularly solitary bees. We've got some particularly rare species there, like the very distinctive longhorned bee, and we've got broad-banded nomad bee, and some other rarer bumblebees like the brown-banded carder bee as well. So one of the key features on this site is a feature that can quite often be overlooked, is bare ground. So we want to do some small scale creation of bare ground. That could easily be done with volunteers, or we might bring on some small machinery and create those habitats. Look at the heathland area, potentially do some thinning. So we're working with the council to try and arrange those management inputs. Two of our other partners, or types of partners in the project, are housing associations. So we're working with 3 housing associations in South Wales: Titarian, Link Cymru and Coastal, and also the Swansea Bay Health Board. Having these sites on board is really important to the project, because this is where it's our big opportunity to engage with local communities and local residents, and people that will hopefully really feel the benefit of a Beelines project and get involved. We'll be consulting with local residents as to what we do and where on their patches, and with the housing associations, and engaging them in habitat action. And we'll be offering a series of training and wellbeing walks as well. And finally, recording is a really important part of the project, and we're going to be supporting this by promoting citizen science schemes such as the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, or POMS, and working closely with our partners Bumblebee Conservation Trust, who will be delivering their really important bee walk scheme. to feed into important national data sets on bumblebee trends and populations. And of course, we'll be encouraging everyone who engages with the project to share their information with the local record centre. And we're also working with a local artist who's going to be engaging with school children between years 7 and 9, and using their work to create a beelines handbook for schools in Neath, Talbot, and a short animated beelines film. And this is just a sneaky peek at the top there of Tom Maloney's artwork, which I think is really, really cool. It's a great image of the longhorn bee there. So we're hoping to inspire everyone within this project, from school children to landowners to local residents, families. So yeah, that's a quick run through the project, and it just finally leaves me to say thank you very much to our funders, thank you to our partners, those that are there, the ones that may come on board during the project, and thank you very much for listening. Diolch.
Diolch yn dda iawn. Bendigedig. That's great. Also, I have to say, Claire, we've got a couple of questions come in. Lee Connolly has asked if the beelines animation is available yn y Gymraeg. Can we translate that for them, do you reckon? When I say we, I very much don't mean me.
Yeah, so the plan is, Steve, that we'll be working with several schools in Neath, Talbot. Some will be Welsh-speaking schools, some will be English-speaking, and we'll be producing the animation in both languages, and it will be spoken by the children, and the artwork will be the children's artwork as well.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you very, very much, and thank you also for your fabulous talk. That's really put it in really clear terms. So we still, unfortunately, haven't got Professor Jeff Ollerton. He will hopefully be coming up a little while later on. But first, we're going to go to Tanya St. Pierre, who comes from Cumbria Wildlife Trust. She is their Get Cumbria Buzzing project manager, and we'll be talking about that project and how it's helped pollinators in Cumbria in her presentation. So I'm hoping to see Tanya. Hello, Tanya. How are you doing?
Hello, Chris. How are you? Can you see me?
Did you just call me Chris?
Steve.
You did.
I do.
Seriously, as if it's not bad enough that he's taking every single ounce of work out there. I have to be called Chris as well.
Well, you know, I'm picking you up. You're moving to big shoes.
You'll be very, very much forgiven if you give a good presentation. No pressure though.
Can I give you 2 red squirrels? We just had 2 red squirrels here. Will that do?
It will. It very much will do. Tanya, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Tanya St. Pierre. I'm Get Cumbria Buzzing's project manager. So, what is the project? What is Get Cumbria Buzzing? It's an innovative and ambitious £1.7 million 3-year pollinator project that runs from 2019 to 2022. It's funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, Highways England, and a range of other funders. Hopefully, I'll have some slides to come on. I know that someone is going to do the slide presentations for me. So, do I have my slides anywhere, please? If I carry on, we have 11 partners, including BugLife, Highways England, Butterfly Conservation, National Trust, and a range of local authorities and other charities. Right, here we go. And I'm hoping everyone can see that. Okay, so the main aim of the project is to create and enhance 115 hectares of habitat across northwest Cumbria. If I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so the aim of the project is to work on road verges and across community sites and raise awareness of pollinators by working with communities across the project area. So we're very much putting the work on the ground that Jamie spoke about. We're also working with our local data centre in Carlisle to create an online pollinator atlas, and as part of the project we also have a wildflower nursery to help provide local provenance wildflowers to grow on sites across our project area. Next slide, please. Okay, as you can see, our project map overlies the northwest beeline, so that's that pale blue buffer zone, and our area covers 100 miles along that blue line. By providing vital stepping stones that we spoke about earlier, we want to create flower-rich habitat for pollinators so they can move freely across the landscape. The project area also includes 28 different community sites, mostly concentrated in Workington, Whitehaven and Maryport, and also parts of the A66 and the A59 strategic road network. So that's that black line that you can see running from Penrith across to Workington, and then just south of the Dissington cluster, it runs from Calder Bridge all the way up to Workington. So that's a strategic road network. The project line itself also runs along the northwest beeline along the coast all the way up to that star, and that star is our wildflower nursery up in Carlisle. Okay, so the main focus of this talk is actually to talk about the work that we delivered on the strategic road network with our partners Highways England. So next slide, please. Okay, so way back in 2018, we undertook a feasibility study for Highways England, and that was during our development phase of the project, and that was to identify sites suitable for restoration and enhancement for pollinators. So this included a baseline survey. So basically, I went out and surveyed about 120 different verge sites. Many of the sites look like this one. And so for some of you out there, you'll recognise it's a false oak grass dominated site where lack of management has resulted in a species poor sward. Next slide, please. Other sites look like this, and this might be familiar to quite a few of you. This is an amenity cut grassland where frequent grass cuts has resulted in grass clippings being left, so horizons are left to rot down, which also creates a species poor sward. Next slide, please. So our aim was to move these species poor swards towards species rich swards. The one on the right hand side is a very nice species rich upland hay meadow. Okay, next slide, please. And this site, what we wanted to do was trial short flowering lawns. So it's your average amenity cut. And what we want to do is put clovers and different species to trial amenity cuts and splays and sight lines to use this to see if we could create more flower rich habitat. Next slide, please. Okay, so during that development phase, we also looked at a range of different research papers. We consulted with ecologists, we worked with other wildlife trusts, and we looked at best practice on management for verges. So including Plant Life's Good Verge Guide, Bug Life's Managing Road Verges for Pollinators, and we'd already worked with Highways England, Natural England, Network Rail, and on the Green Transport Pilot Project between 2015 and 2017. So we use all this information, this knowledge, this learning to apply it to our new project and to devise a range of interventions which we would then roll out with Highways England on their road network. And you can see them here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there were the range of interventions that included the initial works and then the ongoing management. And next slide, please. Okay, so here you can see the works actually got underway. So between April 2020 and March 2021, we undertook habitat enhancement works, and we worked closely with Highways England contractors Ground Control, who did an absolute phenomenal job. And it's due to their efficiency and our partner approach that we're able to go above and beyond our original 31 hectares on the road verges. And you can think most road verges can be quite small. So we had over 100 sites that we worked on, and we delivered a further 8 hectares of verge habitat enhancement works that brought it to 39 hectares. We even worked through the night and piggybacked off other roadworks to prevent disruption to road users. We added a wide range of northern provenance seed mixes, which included wildflower meadow mix, woodland mix, short flowering lawn mixes, and over 70,000 plug plants and spring flowering trees. Each site had its own specific management plan, and each site had its own suite of flowers that we actually went out and scoped out for each site, depending on whether it was sunny, the soil conditions, and all various aspects. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, that's Blencathra in the background, and that's the RoboCut that we work with. We did a lot of work with really specific machinery, specialised machinery. Some of it was imported from Europe, and the contractors did a really good job, as I say. Next slide, please. Okay, a year on, and this is our fruits of our labour. So April 2019, site prior to works is top left-hand corner, and that's, you can see it's a rank grassland site that's starting to have scrub encroachment. If you go clockwise round and follow it around, you can see the works taking place, the seeds coming through, and then all the way through. The last two slides at the bottom left are, as you can see, more flower rich. So a year on, that's a year later, the monitoring work that we've, you can see the difference quite clearly. And that didn't happen at one site, it happened over a wide range of sites after the interventions. Some better than others, some, not so good. Some only just a few species appeared depending on the weather a lot of the time when we did the interventions. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is one of our flowering lawn sites. We actually changed the management on this after conversations with Highways England and Kia, who then looked to a yearly cut rather than, so we didn't actually trial our short flowering lawns, but we are still doing that. But here you can see quite a difference and a lot better for our bees and our butterflies. Next slide, please. And this is another site. What really worked well was the addition of yellow rattle. And you can see the dark brown on the right-hand side. That was just swathes of yellow rattle, which is really a good facilitator species to reduce the grass growth and allow other species to come through. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide on the picture on the left-hand side is a moderately species, well, it's got a few species in it. What we did by enhancing it was make it incredibly species rich, so going from a handful, so 7 or 8 species, through to more than 15 different species by adding seed and plug plants, and that's just within a year. Okay, next slide, please. And the results of our monitoring survey showed that all sites saw an increase in abundance of variety of wildflowers, but we also monitored pollinators on the sites, and we saw an increase of those. And also our interventions included provision for feeding, breeding, and overwintering, so that had also increased. Next slide, please. And just to say as well that our sites not only increased in habitat condition or improved in habitat condition, they also moved to higher distinction grassland habitats that reflect the wider Cumbria landscape of lowland or upland hay meadows. Next slide. And these are some of the species. So eyebright, really lovely species that we introduced from a local site at Icot Hill, meadow cranesbill. Other species such as twayblade were already there on some of the sites, but some like lady's mantle saw an increase. So we recorded more species after intervention works. Next slide, please. And we applied a DEFRA biodiversity metric framework to our monitoring results. And what we saw was an increase in biodiversity net gain after our enhancement, with habitat units more than doubling, providing a 145% total net change of the sites overall, which we were really, really pleased with. Next slide, please. And what we were really, really bowled over with was that Highways England Area 13, who we work very closely with, were recently awarded the Excellence in Environment Sustainability Award. So it's a national award, a real true accolade for the partnership we did through Get Cumbria Buzzing. And that was with Amy Consulting, Cumbria Wildlife Trust, so ourselves, Ground Control, H.W. Martin, Traffic Management Limited, and that was led by Highways England. So really delighted to win that national award. Next slide, please. And very quickly, just to run through these final slides, and this is just to showcase the other work that we're doing alongside the road network work. We have further 28 community sites, and we're working with Butterfly Conservation and Iredale Borough Council to increase habitat for the small blue butterfly. Next slide, if you just want to roll through these slides. Next slides, we've got a few slides just to showcase our work. So these are events and activities, soil groups, and these are identification activities pre-lockdown. Next slide. And this work at our nursery with MenCap and other groups that we have managed to do in and out of lockdowns. We're also encouraging everyone to record across a beeline and record what species they see through our local data centre, Cumbria Biodiversity Data Centre, and through iNaturalist. Next slide. And also we're encouraging everyone in our area to add their postcode to our map when they plant for pollinators in their gardens. And as you can see, we've got lots of bees on that map there. Next slide, please. And finally, this is the highlights of our project 2 years in. We still have one more year of the project to go. We're really delighted that we've had so much support and we've managed to do so much. And that wouldn't have been possible without the help of our partners, the industries that we've worked with, and most importantly, the community and people within Cumbria. And that's obviously underpinned by our funders. So thank you very much, everyone. And we have a very exciting year ahead. Thank you. And hopefully I'll be joined by Chris in a minute. I mean, Steve, again. Luckily you're on mute, Steve. I'm really pleased. You're still on mute.
Good. Oh, sorry. Quite a lot of really good feedback, and particularly people asking about mowing. I've got a borough councillor here who's saying that they really struggle with getting the council to mow at the right time. It's one of my absolute bugbears around here. You know, all they just come through, hack back the hedgerows, hack down all the wildflower meadows just when they're at their absolute best. And this is Sorrel here is asking, how can they engage? How can they manage to convince councils that that the right time is after all of the abundance has happened?
Yeah. Okay. There's two things there, Steve. First of all, you're absolutely right. You know, it's about engaging with your local authority, your councils, and put them. You know, there's so much good research out there. Good Plant Life's Good Verge Guide. Get them to read that. More and more, there is a way. We're working with Cumbria County Council at the moment, and we're doing exactly that. The work from Highways England is being rolled out now up the M6, which is really fantastic. But the second thing is that you've got to appreciate there's a lot of economics behind this. There's also safety aspects behind that. And it's not until you work with the industry you understand that there's sight lines that have to be there to maintain safety. And yes, you know, there is areas which can be sensitively cut, but the economics also drive it. So there might be a rolling program of cutting, but if you can encourage your councils to do 1 year a cut on your verges, for the ones that don't have any safety implications, if they can start on the 1st of August, then you've got after the main season. So it is a case of talking and having that conversation. But we've learned an incredible amount, and it's all about partnership working and trickling it all through.
That's absolutely fantastic. You are forgiven for continually referring to me as Chris Packham, if only because your next slide, please, is done with so much more panache than Chris Whitty. I have to say what I'm particularly thrilled about from your talk is that there's just so much good news, so much positivity. And it's something that I think, struggle for in conservation. You know, my opening address was just filled with doom and gloom. To see it working, to see it in action, you know, it makes everything worthwhile, and it gives us hope and a reason to proceed. So thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much for that amazing talk. Next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Neil Strong, who is Biodiversity Strategy Manager with Network Rail, currently leading on the work to baseline the biodiversity on the railway estate as Network Rail works towards a target of biodiversity net gain by 2035. Wow, bold goal there. His career highlight was meeting Sir David Attenborough. Well, until today, obviously, and that was while he was doing works to improve the habitat for the large blue butterfly in the west of England. He's now very much looking forward to the opportunity to use their estate and their new data to assist with initiatives like the Beeline projects. While he's not doing railway things, Neil is practically my neighbour. He is a Cub Scout leader at my local troop in Bourne End, and he can often be found escaping work and the Cubs by kayaking on the Thames. So he probably pretty much paddles past my front door. Neil, are you out there? Shall I just talk until Neil turns up?
He's not. He's not. So we're going to go to Jeff, having just done that intro. My apologies, but we've lost Neil.
Oh,
so we'll try Jeff again.
I'm being told that we have lost Neil. That introduction I gave him. Just remember that, and next time round, I'll just say Neil, and you can remember that was the person I introduced as being my local Cub Scout leader. Instead, we're going to go back to Professor Jeff Ollerton. So I hope now have Jeff on the line. He is a consultant scientist and author with a particular focus on pollinators. He is currently visiting professor of biodiversity at the University of Northampton, and Jeff has been studying pollinators and their interactions with flowers for over 30 years. He is the author of more than 125 research articles and book chapters, as well as more popular articles for magazines such as British Wildlife and New Scientist. His book, Pollinators and Pollinations, Nature and Society, get on Amazon right now, type it in and get yourself a copy, was published in January by Pelagic Publishing. So I'm going to hand over now, hopefully, fingers crossed, to Professor Jeff Ollerton. Jeff, are you out there?
Yeah, Steve, can you hear me?
Amazing. Good stuff. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. And apologies to everyone for the technical issues. Technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't, it's not so great. So let me just give me a minute while I just share my my screen with you. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that. So what I wanted to do today was really just set the context for all of this great work that is happening at the moment. The work that we've just been hearing about, just some fantastic projects across the country. And really, I'm going to begin with thinking about what pollinators actually are. Now, animals, of course, can move around to find mates. Plants can't do that, so they need to use what we term a pollen vector in order to move their pollen around to engage in reproduction. And anybody who suffers from hay fever knows that a minority of plants are wind pollinated. There are some plants which are water pollinated as well, aquatic plants. But the vast majority of plants are animal pollinated. And by animal, I mean insects, but also vertebrates like bats and birds and so on. And globally, we know that about 90% of the flowering plant species in the world use insects and vertebrates for their pollination. That's probably about 302,000 species of plants. In the UK, it's about 70% of our native species. We think we've got about 1,500 species that are native to this country. And we have got a surprising diversity of pollinators in this country. I think quite often people don't really realize just how many different types of pollinators we have. We've got about 270 species of bees. I'm saying approximately because actually we're being joined by new species of bees that are migrating due to things like climate change, things like habitat alterations. But about 270 species of bees. A similar number of hoverflies, about 60 species of butterflies, not all of which actually visit flowers, of course, and then about 800 species of larger moths. And again, not all of those visit flowers by any means, but the majority do. But we've also got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different types of beetles, other types of flies, wasps, sawflies, and so on, which collectively make up the most of the diversity of our native pollinators. Stephen Falk, who many of you will be familiar with for his work on pollinator conservation and his book on Field Guide to British and Irish Bees, he estimates that as many as 6,000 British insect species might actually visit flowers and act as pollinators, which is an extraordinary diversity, really. Well, why does it matter? Why does it matter that we've got 10 species of pollinators, or 100, or 1,000, or 6,000? Well, it matters for at least 4 reasons. One is that wild plants may be adapted to particular pollinators. So plants that are adapted for bee pollination, for example, can't be pollinated by flies, or plants that are adapted specifically for bumblebee pollination may not be able to be pollinated by honeybees. So that's one reason. The other reason is that we know that crop pollination is more effective even if we have more species, even if we have the same number of individual insects. If there are more species involved in that crop pollination of the crop is more effective. And something to remember is that honeybees, which are often seen as being the main crop pollinator, are actually performing only about 30% of the crop pollination in this country in total. The other, at least 70%, is being performed by wild, wild bees. Even if we could get enough honeybees in this country to do all of our crop pollination, which we can't, there aren't enough beekeepers within the country to do that, or even people interested in beekeeping. But even if we could, if we just rely on a single species for all of our crop pollination, that is a really, really risky strategy. We know about disease issues and things like varroa with honeybees. It's a very, very risky strategy. But the final reason why this matters is something that Steve alluded to in his introduction at the start. It's what we're leaving behind for our children, and our children's children, and our children's children's children. It's the biodiversity heritage that we've inherited within this country that we're leaving behind. The recent Economics of Biodiversity review, the Dasgupta review, which was released a couple of weeks ago, which the government had asked to be presented, makes a very, very strong case for why conservation of biodiversity is important in this country purely from an economic point of view, the way in which our society is underpinned by biodiversity. And there's some interesting statistics in there. One is that pollinators contribute somewhere around between sort of 500 and possibly 700 million pounds per year to the UK's agricultural production, which seems like a lot of money, but actually it's a relatively small proportion of agricultural output. I think it's about 10%. And it's a very small proportion of our GDP, of course. But as the Dasgupta review states, that pollinators may be of great value even if their measurable services to gross domestic product are of negligible worth. And I think it's really important to bear that in mind, that it's not just about the economics of biodiversity, it's the other things that pollinators give us. And actually last week I published this commentary in New Scientist, which pointed out that in fact pollinators are helping us in respect to fighting climate change because of their indirect contribution to adding carbon to the soils. And it's something that's not really been appreciated previously. And that article is open access. If you Google the title there, you'll be able to read it. But it's not something we can measure in terms of GDP, but nonetheless, pollinators are playing a really fundamental role there. However, as Steve alluded to and others have mentioned, pollinator diversity in the UK is changing. The Centre for Ecology and Hydrology and the Joint Nature Conservation Committee has shown that by tracking this index of pollinator diversity across the UK since the 1980s, that there's been significant long-term and short-term declines in quite a number of our wild bees and in our hoverflies as well. Some of them are doing very well, some of them have increased, but for quite a significant proportion there has been a decline. And more recently, the charity Butterfly Conservation released this latest report on the state of Britain's larger moths. And this is really, really worrying. There's been a 33% decline in moths from the 1960s through to the present day. Latest data for that is up to 2017. So a third of our moths have gone in terms of abundance in Britain. And for some species, that decline has been even greater. I put a picture there from the report of the lappet moths. There's been a 98% decrease in abundance of that particular moth, and a 61% decrease in its distribution. Perhaps just think about that for a minute, a 98% decrease in abundance. And there's no doubt, there's far more focus and attention being paid to birds that have had declines around 90% than there is to the insects. But actually, the two things are closely related. We're losing insectivorous birds because we're losing the insects on which they feed. There's multiple reasons for that loss of those insects. The statistic about 97% of our wildflower meadows having gone since the 1940s has been mentioned. There's other kinds of habitats have been lost as well due to expansion of agriculture, urbanization, and so on. Poor management of other habitats as well has been a big factor, particularly long-established coppice woodlands that are not being appropriately managed at the moment. Use of pesticides, use of herbicides, intensification of farming, all of that's having an effect as well. And of course, in the last decade or so, we see that climate change is starting to have an impact, and particularly extremes of weather, extremes of rainfall, and extremes of drought as well. All of those are playing a big role. So what can we do about it? How can we conserve and support pollinators? Well, you've just seen some really, really positive examples of what is being done across the country, but we need much, much more of this. And the book that Steve kindly mentioned, which came out earlier this year, Pollinators and Pollination, Nature and Society, one of the things I developed within that book is what I call the requirements of pollinators triangle. And it's all about thinking about what pollinators need throughout their life cycle. And at the top of the triangle there, of course, flowers are amazingly important. And that's what most of us think about when we think, how can we conserve, how can we support pollinators? But flowers are only part of the story. Sites for reproduction, nesting sites, and specific kind of microhabitats, and also host plants are really, really important. Here's a good example here, actually, from my garden. At least the larvae, the caterpillars there are from my garden. The cinnabar moth. The adults feed on a wide range of different kinds of flowers, but the caterpillars only feed on ragworts. And so if the ragworts are not present within a habitat, then the cinnabar moth is not going to be present within that habitat. And the final axis of the triangle is something that I call supplements, for want of a better name. It's the other things that pollinators require, and it could be additional kinds of food. So for our pollinating wasps, for example, most of them are carnivorous, so they don't just need flowers; they need insects on which to feed. But they may need nesting materials as well, and perhaps the best example of that, of course, are the leaf-cutting bees that need a supply of appropriate leaves that they can cut the little semicircular discs out to make those nests, and hibernation sites as well. Really, really important for things like queen bumblebees, for many of our butterflies and moths and hoverflies, which overwinter as adults as well. And I think that's what's really exciting about the Beelines project. I got involved in it quite a few years ago when I was part of a workshop that was looking at how we could connect some of the existing bee lines together across Northamptonshire, where I'm living at the moment, and down into Bedfordshire as well. And it was clear then bee lines is about more than just flowers. It's about creating habitat, and it's creating habitat for a wide range of different pollinators, not just bees. And that habitat can support those pollinators and fulfill all of the life cycle requirements of those insects. So that's all from me now. So just to kind of sum up, pollinators are really diverse. Even in Britain, there's more to pollinators than just honeybees. That diversity is really important. And there's huge value of pollinators, both the natural world and to human society. And in my opinion, and the opinion of many of us, conservation of pollinators and the habitats in which they depend should be a real priority for local councils, for government, and for conservation organisations as well. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to hearing some of the questions and getting involved with chatting with some of you. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Jeff. I mean, I can totally see now why we had scheduled to have Jeff on first. He's spoken so eloquently and graphically, putting into context what the problem is and why it matters. I think it's the bane of any modern conservationist world. When we understand a problem, we can see it's there, we have all the evidence, we know what the problem is and how it needs to be solved, but nothing's being done. And so refreshing to be hearing today about a problem that we know about and understand and are genuinely addressing. I think everyone who's speaking today, everyone who's involved in this massive, mammoth, marvelous project should be very, very proud of that. So if this was a normal conference, I would be encouraging you all now to pop out for a chat and a cuppa. But as it's not, and we're all in lockdown, then like me, I would suggest you can pop off for a wee and maybe a post-breakfast sherry. I kind of get the feeling we're all around about there. We do have a virtual networking area, so you can pop there, check it out. We'll have a chance to do that in more depth a little bit later on. And if you come back here in a couple of minutes' time, maybe 11:25. So a very quick wee, I will speak to you all then.